Okay, I'm Emmy Thomas, and I'm talking today with Luca. And I want to ask you, Luca, what is it like to be you? What is it like to experience life the way that you do?
Um, just kind of depends on the day, I guess. I guess overall, I would say it's one part superhero comic, one part fairy tale, one part horror story. Um, like how I see myself, how I view the world versus what the world actually is and how it functions versus what I wish it could be and what I just want for myself in general. It's Uh, yeah, ENTP, Gemini. My mind goes to a lot of different places very quickly. Um, I'm basically it's like it's Schrodinger. It can be anything at one time at all times, and yet it's nothing. And it's crazy. It really is kind of crazy. It sucks.
Yeah, I think one word that I used to like, or I still kind of like it, is I think it's from uh, what's his name? Soren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher. And he uses the word, I don't know what the word is in Danish, but they translate it to cipher. I was like,
Mm,
I love this cipher because it's basically like cipher. It is just kind of like this thing that's unknowable a little bit. I like the
yeah,
Schrodinger's example too. I think he actually uses cipher in one of his like more famous something on self, and he kind of talks about yeah, what is it like? Some people live this way, without a sense of self, and they are a cipher. So he's one of the few that I've seen kind of objectively, like not from a psychological angle and not calling it psychopathy, but like saying something that's a little bit similar to the experience of feeling like there's not a lot of definition there, I guess. But I
yeah.
mean, do you feel that way because you just said that you're also Gemini and you're also, did you say ENTJ?
ENTP, yeah.
ENTP. So I mean, I guess you do define yourself as certain things. So maybe describe why you identify with those labels and how you conceptualize yourself.
Well, first, you said oh, I've already forgot it. Definition, I think, when you were talking about Kierkegaard.
Hmm.
Um, that's a very good word. Like as soon as you
Cipher.
said it, it was just like, no, no, no. You used it
Ah,
to talk about. You said like a good definition or good I don't know. It starts with a D. I just don't remember which one it was, but it was something. It just very resonated with the feeling because I do agree with him of like not having that sense of self and just everything you said. Totally, yes. That is kind of why I use those outside categorizers, partly because it helps me. Like, okay, if somebody were to say like, oh, describe yourself, that is probably the worst question you could ask me because you just opened up the Pandora's box of Pandora's boxes in my mind, which just bleh.
it's funny you
But
say that because my girlfriend Aria always, especially when we first knew each other, she was more kind of like baby psychopath kind of seeming. But she was like, I don't understand people who can fill out these bios for the social media accounts. Like, who are these people
I
who can just
know, yeah,
condense their life, their personality to like 50 characters or whatever?
it's so crazy because it is like you asked me to explain, you asked me to write you a paper or like put on a show or something abstract where I can kind of do what I want within sorry, one second. Alexa, stop. You know, I'm just gonna unplug it because it's gonna keep going off and I don't know how many alarms are on there right now. Sorry. No, yeah, like I can do that with my eyes closed, hands tied behind my back, in a wrapped up blanket under the ocean, half dead.
Hmm.
Easy peasy, and it'll be one of the best pieces of art you've ever seen. You asked me to do math. You asked me what 1 plus 1 is. I'm going to tell you 11, and I'm going to say it with so much conviction because it's just like it's outside my wheelhouse. So here you go. But then with myself, like yeah, filling out those forms is hell because you're asking me to describe myself with my own words. But then male, female, what's your gender, what ethnicity are you, it's like done, this, that one, this one, that one, that one, easy. So yeah, I think it is because it's like a it's not so much a descriptor as it is just a category. And it's useful just in general, like as I don't particularly, I'm queer, I don't particularly care for labels in that aspect of gender or orientation, but I find them useful. It's easy to, I don't want to say categorize people, but to at least in your mind or in my mind go, okay, you're this because of this, this, and this, even though you don't actually think of yourself as that particular word, right?
Mhm.
It's just, it's makes things simpler without going overboard into, because yeah, no, talking about Myers-Briggs to astrology, I always have to tell people like, and this is just in general, you know, it's there's always exceptions to the rule. It's everyone's different. Blah.
But you said it makes things simpler, but does it make things simpler because, like, to communicate to other people? Like, this is kind of like, you know, people say like, you're type A. I'm type A, and that helps other people to understand. Okay, this person's very maybe even a little fussy, perfectionist. Like very detail oriented or something. Like, is that why you say it
Yeah.
makes things simpler, or does it make things
Well, when
simpler
I
also for
say,
you somehow? Like, this is who I
well,
am.
when I'm saying simpler, I'm saying for me, like it's
Hmm.
just easier in my mind to categorize things because it's like, you know, the difference between P's and J's and the Myers-Briggs is J's like the outside world, categorized, everything clean, organized. My room looks like a hurricane hit it, but I can tell you where everything is.
Uh-huh.
But then in my head, like, no, if I have to like remember each and every specific detail about every specific person that I know, it's never going to happen, as opposed to, yeah, I'm type A or type B, or I'm an ENTP or an ENTJ. It just makes it easier for me. I think easier in the outside world for those purposes. But then that is getting more into thinking territory as opposed to feeling territory where people don't like being labeled, and I don't like being labeled. Like I 100% am a rebel in all respects. I don't like it. I don't like anyone telling me who I am or what I am unless I'm asking for it in a way like that. Like, am I, you know, where do I fall on the scale? How many points of whatever do I have in this model? All that stuff.
So when you say it makes things simpler, you mean like quite literally, like it simplifies things into like categories and that's easier to
Yes.
kind of understand, remember. And
Yeah,
then
and it's simplicity for the sake of efficiency and speed, and I'm just hella impatient and I don't want to have to think any extra than I already do. So yeah.
but you also said you yourself kind of don't like labels applied to you, queer and maybe some other ones. Why?
No, yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those human things, I think, because I think in some respect everyone is like that. We like labels to a certain point, but we don't want to be labeled by other people. But then, as you know, as much as I hate this feeling of not being able to fit in, or not yeah, excuse me, not being able to fit in, but not knowing where I fit in. But then all of the labels that I pick are the things that are, everyone says an ENTP is the kind of shapeshifter of the Myers-Briggs. They kind of fall everywhere. Gemini are obviously, you know, two-faced douchebags. No, I'm kidding. But you know, we're also shapeshifters, and even even sociopathy itself, like it's a matter of, you know, putting on the mask to try to fit in with everyone else, even if it's not necessarily you. You're playing a character. So it's, yeah, I don't like labels because it feels like none of them ever appropriately apply to me. So I have to really dig in and sift through every possible thing. I just found out in the past couple months what gender free is, which is basically it's one of the non-binary things. Only in this specific case, it's just I don't really believe in gender as a concept altogether, and there's it's I couldn't tell you exactly why, but reading those really detailed minutia about what that is versus all the other different orientations you could be, it was like, okay, this one for now fits the most for me.
So you say that you kind of feel like you play a character, but is it true though when you read things like gender free that you are able to recognize yourself in descriptions?
Yeah, but then that's when I say I'm playing a character, that's for other people.
Mhm.
That's that is to like, because if I'm just out in the world by myself, I've got my headphones in, I'm trying to get in, do what I need to do, get out. Like I can do the witty banter thing. I don't like small talk, but I can do that. And I can be a person, but that's a wildly different animal from when I'm with people and playing that character, because then it is tapping into a particular energy reserve that is reserved for that specific situation.
Mm.
uh, the labeling part ties into it just because it's like all the chaos going on inside that I'm not able to clearly see and identify. I can see it in these labels. So, and like I said, it's not a simple thing. Like I continuously go back and forth with the Myers-Briggs, and like I'll retest myself all the time. So it depends on what it is, and it depends on how it's written and how I'm able to take it in and process it, I guess.
Hmm. So you said you have this separate energy reserve for when you're around people and you have to play a character. But like why do you have to play a character?
Because most of the time it's if I do those things that come naturally to me, it does come off as, at least I've been told, because, from my perspective, I don't see it at all. But I've been told I can be very mean and childish, just every negative, shitty thing one can be called. I have been called it, and I've been called it multiple times by people who also claim like, oh, we no, we'd never say something like that to our friends. It's like, okay, so I'm not. I think that's what it is. It's like most of the time I have to play a character, because if these people see the real me, I never get anywhere. But even then, like, it's it's difficult to explain just without being in those situations in the moment, because it's like I don't feel like I'm doing it. I don't feel like I'm playing that character right now, just
Mhm.
because I'm kind of saying what's on my mind. I'm just talking, where I guess it's not the energy reserve is comes from a type of thinking that has to occur of, okay, how do I say it? What do I say that will come off not even good or as well liked, but appropriate?
Mhm.
Because most of the time that's what it is. It's I'm considered inappropriate. I'm the person who's not crying at a funeral because it doesn't make sense to me, because like, okay, I get it, you're mourning, but why? To me, like a hyper specific example, but like funerals are, they're not for the person who died, they're for the people who are still there, and I'm not about it. Like I don't like it. It's a heavy, very moist, arid feeling that I don't care for. I don't want to breathe that air.
Yeah.
But then if I don't go, I'm considered an asshole. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
it's that it's that type of character.
Yeah, and if the funerals are for the people who are grieving, then why would you be considered an asshole if you're like, "No, thank you."
You tell me. Like that's what I keep trying to ask people. Like I don't get it. I'm telling you because I'm very much like I'm not a I'm not one to hide or to not express myself. And I've always, ever since I was a little kid, gotten shut down for that. My emotions are too much and blah blah blah. And that just goes into the whole toxic masculinity, guys not being able to control their emotions well. That's a whole separate animal right there. But like for this stuff, it's hey, I would tell people straight up, like I am not the person to come to if you want to cry it out and all that. Like I'm the person who's gonna like help you feel better because I'm gonna take you out and we're gonna do something. We're gonna help you forget about your problem. And then if you want to talk about it, you can talk about it, but I'm gonna try and help you. Like I'm gonna try and fix it for you if I can, or give you some kind of advice. And then people, you know, rarely ever utilize that. And then when they like want to come to me and like it's a funeral and they're like, oh, like, okay, all right, now I'm touching you. Now we're hugging. Great, great. Now you're crying on me. Now my shoulder's wet. Please get off of me.
Mhm.
And again, I'm the asshole for just being myself. So I have to
Yeah.
put on that character and then, put on like I'm still not going to go out of my way and cry, but like, oh, come here. I have to do all that. And it is extremely draining considering the fact that I'm an extrovert and I get my energy from being out in the crowds.
It's an interesting point. Why do they get to be themselves and like be sad at a funeral and cry on your shoulder and get your shoulder wet, and you can't be yourself? Like, why is one inappropriate somehow?
I You opened my mind to that in the book when you said uh it seems like empathic people can be more dangerous because I forget, I haven't gotten there in this read through yet, but it's something like that where it's like empathic people basically run the world and get to determine how everything is done and how everything, not done physically, but how it's done emotionally speaking. Like you have to act this way, you have to be perceived this way. And then if you don't, then it's like, oh, you're not crying at a funeral. You must be deranged and psychotic. But like, no, I'm just not a crier. I'm not, that's no thank you. I already said this and now you're getting mad at me for being honest with you. Like it's dangerous. It's insidious and it's dangerous.
So you mostly then kind of pretend that in these types of situations you have this energy reserve for playing a character just to avoid kind of these situations in which somebody, tries to call you out or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Like with some people I'm able to not have to put on as much. The few best friends that I've had, and even then, none of them have lasted. Um with like then there's some people like with my family members that I have to because my parents are like older people in general and I'm the kid, so if I do anything to upset them they're just going to yell at me. But as an adult now I've been trying to drop that a little bit and it's definitely caused a lot of tension, and I'm just like, you know what, no, I'm not going to let you control me and tell me how to be when it's simple stuff like when I was in Illinois back home, my brother had come because he lives in Virginia. So we were all just there at my mom's house and they were going to go to a park and they were like, oh, yeah, you should come with. And I'm like, oh, no, thank you. Just, I'm not, I don't want to do that today.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, come on, man. Let's yeah. Because it was going to be him, my mom, my sister-in-law, my two nephews.
Mhm.
And it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to go to the park and do that because all I'm going to end up doing is go walking around on my own because y'all are going to sit there and talk about, the kids and just everyday life and stuff that's not particularly interesting to me.
Mhm.
But then, I'm just, so yeah, I'm just politely declining. And they all like, they didn't get like angry about it, but they were upset and they're like, "Oh, come on, that's like we're here and it's we haven't been together in a year or so." And then it's like, okay, I said no.
Mhm.
Why are you getting like your knickers in a twist?
Yeah. Do you think it's I mean, can you see why they might be kind of like, put off by behavior like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like
Well, you
I get it, I can see it, but this isn't like a one-time thing. This
well,
is every time this happens.
yes,
Well,
yes.
not every time, but anytime it happens and it is just something like, oh, no, I'm not feeling up to it today. Because I don't always say no. Usually I am the one who's just kind of putting aside what it is that I want to be doing and putting on that character and going out with them and just sucking it up. And in
Right.
that particular instance, I was just like, not today.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
not
they got
today.
upset. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, like, how can we decline okay, did you say not today or did you say no?
I mean, I didn't just flat out say no, but it wasn't all. It was, something like, oh, you know what? No, I'm not really into it. Like, thanks. Maybe next time or the next day or whatever the next outing was gonna be. And like, I always make sure if I am saying no to offer something else. Cause it was like maybe we can like see a movie tomorrow or something, or if there's gonna be like I said, another outing in the next couple of days or something, I'll totally go to that. But it was just in that moment, I didn't want to do the thing, and everybody got upset with me.
Mhm. Do you think that, I mean, it's kind of an interesting question. It's too bad we don't have a neurotypical person to kind of justify this kind of behavior. Like, why do you feel the need? But I'm a little curious, like what you would say, and then I'll let you know what my guess is, what a normal person would say. Like, why would your brother be kind of like put off about this type of situation? Like you said, you understand, but maybe just voice it, and we'll see if we're both thinking the same thing.
Well, for him in that like specific day, it would have been because it was probably the first or second day that they were there,
Hmm.
and we hadn't seen each other in probably about a year, uh, and he just wanted to spend some time with me, which yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of interesting. He wanted to spend some time with you. If he wanted to spend some time with you, though, you'd be willing to do it. You just didn't want to do that particular activity.
Yes.
So it is kind of funny because it makes you look difficult, but are you actually the one being difficult, or are other people kind of being the ones being difficult? you know?
That could be the like subtitle of my autobiography.
Yeah.
It's always that.
It's interesting kind of talking to you because I listened to Once Upon a Time this some he was supposed to be like a guru on communication. And there were like some really good things that I kind of learned from him. One of them was about unspoken expectations. And he said something about like frustration. You can never be frustrated unless you had an expectation, right? That and an expectation that wasn't somehow being met. And then you have to kind of ask yourself, was it an unspoken expectation I had? Or was there kind of I communicated it to the other person and the other person consented, to like, yes, that is the plan, or yes, that is a possibility. But I find that so much, and this is kind of really, I think, the rub with the neurodiversity movement is that, somebody who's kind of normal naturally expects people to act and think and react like them, I guess. I think everybody does, to a certain extent or something. But I guess if those are unspoken expectations, then this person's going to behave in this particular way. Like this person's going to say yes to this family thing because we haven't seen each other in a year or something. And this is going to indicate, so my guess was, to kind of like quickly pause where I'm going here. My guess would have been that your brother was upset because it showed a lack of investment in the relationship. It's been a year and you're not willing to put aside your kind of personal likes and dislikes for just one afternoon to just kind of go with the group. And I think there is like a lot of tribalism, a lot of the pressure to conform, I think, comes from these evolutionary kind of incentives, which is that, if you're so iconoclastic, you said earlier that you were a rebel. If you're that way all the time, then people feel like maybe they can't rely on you to always act in the benefit of the group. Instead, they may think that you're going to try to act for your own benefit, sometimes at the group's detriment. And that just since they can't rely on you, you become kind of an unpredictable element to them, such that they're less willing to invest in you. They're like, well, a normal person in the tribe, I would like lend my car to, but not you for some reason because you're an
That
unpredictable element, right?
makes too much sense and it hurts.
That would have been my guess, but I also think, they need to own that. If that's what they're saying, then they need to communicate that, because it's like it's an unspoken expectation, and for them to just get disappointed because they just expect you to pick up on that somehow, the reasoning is interesting. And it is funny because I think kind of empathic thought is like neurotypical thought, I guess, is that you that to speak those sorts of things somehow cheapens them or something. Like they shouldn't have to be said. Like how often do we hear that phrase? It shouldn't have to be said.
Yeah.
And I'm always like,
Yeah.
when does this phrase ever apply? It shouldn't have to be said. Like it's a phrase that is way overused and probably almost is never true. And I'll tell you a quick example of something that I think is like just kind of plays with that notion a little bit. So I have a bunch of nieces and nephews too, and one of them was going through a stage. I mean, she was always like really nice, super social, like learned everybody's names really early, which I thought was funny because most of my nieces and nephews don't pick up on some of the more outside the family, the one uncle we only see once a year or something. But I mean, she knew
Yeah.
everybody's names, was really social, engaged and stuff. And then she kind of went through like this phase where it'd be like, "Hey, can you grab me that cup real quick, in the kitchen or something, or doing the dishes?" And she'll be like, "No." And it did kind of like rub me the wrong way. I was like, well, here I am trying to do the dishes. You also use dishes. But I'm just thinking that in my head. I'm not saying it. So I confronted her mom a little bit about it, and which is kind of like, what's up with her saying no all the time to these things? And her mom was like, I was just reading about this, and she's going through a phase in which everything's kind of quid pro quo, tit for tat, and that's just like the social reasoning psychological stage she's at right now. And she's like, it,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense to expect her to be at a different stage, than she
Yeah.
is. That's just the stage she's at. So she was like, ever since I learned this, I've just been trying to, if she says no, say things like, well, I have done XYZ for you today. Now can you get the cup? And she'll do it, because then she understands, oh, yeah, I'm in this
Yeah.
exchange and I can see that I'm being fairly treated. And here, this is just, like, this is only fair to grab the cup. Here we go. We're doing the dishes together type thing. So I think it's
Yeah.
interesting, like your brother probably, was upset and felt justifiably upset about it, but he never communicated that expectation to you. And without kind of that communication, yeah, it does seem kind of crazy that you just expect people to act a particular way, to just kind of kowtow to what you've decided and what the group's doing. But I feel like once they get in a group, they're like, no, that's what we're all doing. We're all meeting at X
Oh my
the
God.
place.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's that. Ugh.
And they stop
That
being like
is my friends
individuals.
groups. Yes, exactly that. It's I you had said oh, I totally lost it. But it was about how you started, you changed the way you were thinking about speaking to your niece. And it's funny, it's weird and it's funny and it's ironic that usually neurodiverse people will will, at least, especially I say especially for me because it's something that I don't want to be doing. Like I'll go out of my way to put in all of these different like factors and extra variables in how I think about communicating with people. But then yeah, it's always on the other end, neurotypical people, yeah, will always resort to it being an order or a command or shaming or guilting or trying to use emotion. And I guess that's, right there, just this straight up difference in
Yeah.
how we think and how we go about the world. It's always like, okay, well, if I can't do that, then let's try this emotion. And typical like superhero pose where they've got their hands next to their head and they're like straining to telepathically like get you to feel something. And it's, yeah, no, I just think it's super super weird and
I
kind
can
of gross.
Yes, I can see why they do it, but it is like I think when it's manipulative. They're
Yes.
trying to get a certain reaction in you, trying to get you to say yes, trying to go to the park. If that's not manipulation, I don't know what is or something. I think it's kind of interesting because I think people think of psychopaths, oh, manipulators, liars, or whatever. And it's like, okay, but I do feel like people try to manipulate me to kind of conform like on the regular, you know?
It makes you wonder if a psychopath or a sociopath or anyone who is neurodivergent lies, manipulates, cheats, does all these different things, are they doing it because they want to? Or are they doing it because they feel like they have to and it's just easy because of everything else?
Yes. So this is a very chicken eggy question, which
Yeah.
came first. But I think I think at least an interesting idea I've explored, a couple other times before. But like, why do you play a character? It's because you don't want to get rejected. You don't want to, get people mad at you. You don't want to get manipulated and have them kind of like force you to do something else, anyways. So like, why say no when you're just going to get manipulated to do it anyways? You might as well just say yes and,
Yeah.
not go through kind of the trouble. So it's
It's
like,
a very, I was just gonna say, it's a very mammalian brain quality. Like, make sure you're a part of the herd, otherwise, bad things will happen.
yeah, and it's interesting because, I think the first time I like ever thought a little bit about this was it's totally random. Hopefully this is going somewhere. But I was watching the TV show The L Word, right? And this was like when came out. So it must have been like a decade and a half ago or something. And I had no clue who Jennifer Beals is, right? I had not
Hmm.
seen Flashdance, or do you know even who I'm talking about?
I I'm pretty sure I do, but now I'm like second guessing myself. From she's in Seventh Heaven,
Oh, I don't
or
know.
am I thinking of somebody totally? I think I'm thinking of somebody totally different.
Yeah, it could be, could be. So Jennifer Beals, I was just watching her in the L Word first season or something, and then there was like, I think it was in the first season, there was a reference, and somebody, I think it was somebody. Now this is like, I mean, it's been a decade, so forgive my memory, everybody. But some other character kind of confronts her and says, "Well, you can pass." And I was like, passes what? What are they even talking about? This passing. And then I guess the issue is, and I had not realized the actress Jennifer Beals is biracial, right? Like, and that's what
Mm,
they were discussing. They were discussing the fact that she could pass as being kind of, I guess, normal, white. Like she didn't have to
yeah.
kind of bear the brunt of the prejudice of being African American because she could pass. And I actually remember in law school, it was so crazy. I mean, she had white hair at the time and she had blue eyes, and she was like it was the Black Law Students Association, balsa, right? They had like some speakers come up and talk about kind of segregation at the time, that they were like starting their law practice, et cetera, et cetera. And so here's this like white haired blue eyed woman talking about this, and I was like, I don't get this, like, forgive my ignorance, everybody, but I was like, but she's just, I mean, she's like biracial, right? And
Mm,
so it's just kind of interesting because I also know I have like transgender friends who just pass and they're not really out, and I'm kind of like, well, is that a choice or should they have to be? There's just an interesting kind of level of like some people are quirky but they can pass. And so I think that should be kind of like an option. If you want to pass, then go ahead, and nobody should judge you for it, right? But if you don't
Yeah.
want to pass, then why is it that we kind of pressure people to conform? Why is it that we pressure them to look, sound, talk, respond in these particular ways? It is like very kind of damaging, it seems like, to people's identity. And I remember also reading in this, I think I mentioned before, I want to say it's Ta-Nehisi Coates said it, but was kind of, I have never been able to successfully relocate this. It was like in the Atlantic or something. But he was talking about how when his daughters, African American author, when his daughters were young, they were like just great, and whatever. And then starting about the age of 4 or 5, 6 or something, he could kind of tell that they were like understanding that they were Black girls in America, and could kind of see
Mm,
them adapting to that a little bit. Like their behavior changed a little bit, their personalities changed a little bit, the way they dressed changed a little bit, and they just
yeah.
became not really that pure expression of themselves anymore, but just kind of a little bit distorted. And so I think in
Yeah.
some ways, like, to think about kind of why most kind of psychopathic people lie and manipulate is mostly this. Like, imagine, I was listening, or I was talking to, you can look it up, Weiwei. And Weiwei said that when she was young, she understood that what she was naturally was repulsive to other people, is the word she used. And so she's
Oh
like,
God.
yeah, she's repulsive. So she's like, well, I'm just gonna hide that part of me and just never express that then around people, so they're not repulsed. So I don't keep having these terrible situations.
That's that's just upsetting, honestly.
It is kind of interesting. I think I'm not saying that the lying and manipulating, I'm not trying to justify it. Like, I don't think it's a good way to be. I don't recommend people, oh, yeah, just keep, you know, just keep pretending to be something you're not. I don't think it's good for anybody, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, I don't think there's really any social value to that at all. I'd be really interested
No,
if
yeah.
somebody justify, like, oh no, there is social value because of X. I understand why there's evolutionary value to it. I could see how, like, okay, social cohesion, makes it, if we can see, because even like genetics, you can, what was it, the selfish gene or whatever, like you're more likely to take care of your nephews and nieces than a stranger, because you're like, well, they
Yeah.
share, what, a quarter of my genetic code.
Yeah. Like, no, yeah, it's very that. And overall, it makes you wonder, okay, if everyone, and I say everyone because at this point you can't really, especially with social media and the internet in general, you can't not be aware that you're not really you. You're you to a certain extent, but you're also a little bit of everyone else who you ever come into contact with in any kind of significant way, because of the fact that we all have, everything accessible to us at all times, and it is the chicken and the egg. Like, okay, am I interested in this because I actually like it, or I know that the particular group that I'm in is, I use this for gay men all the time. Like, do we do the whole hookup culture thing because we like it, or because we've kind of been forced into it, and now we kind of have to just deal with it because we can't see, regular, like, oh, meeting at a coffee shop, like, as an actual dating reality. And I think about it more and more and more because, like, I'm 30 now, but even back in my early 20s, I hated it. Like, I didn't want to do that, and it messed up a lot of my, like, relationships because of it. And because I felt like I was, forcing myself to do this thing that I wasn't interested in doing. And now that I am older, I'm seeing, like, 21-year-olds and 19-year-olds, like, on these apps, and, hooking up with like 40-year-old guys, and it's kind of gross, especially when you just mentioned it with like these little kids, and they kind of grow up and they see what the world is, and they kind of adjust themselves accordingly, even if they don't realize it. Like that 19-year-old is still a kid in my mind. And so all of this weird just mess of what people expect culture to be in conjunction with everyone else who's just not a part of their culture. It's I don't know if I'm totally like lost my train of thought and went on a tangent there, but it all just it sucks. It
No,
really
I
just fucking sucks.
I think it's really interesting, and we see it kind of rising too with nationalism, right? Like, I mean,
God,
I
yeah.
remember I was a music major. We had to do music history, and there was one movement, kind of like the late 19th century, early 20th century, that was kind of nationalistic, right? So you had like
Mm,
Wagner, and you had Richard Strauss, but you also had like these Czech composers, who are, with a lot of pride and whatever. But I remember kind of studying this and being like, that's so crazy how everybody was just so proud of their
yeah.
countries or whatever. And then it leads in part a little bit to the world wars, right? Kind of like just
Hmm.
kind of continues right in there. And now we're kind of doing this again. And I just read something about a take about Israel and Hamas, right? Because, like
Yeah.
people listening to this in a year or two from now, they're like bombing each other right now. Who knows what will happen? And somebody kind of suggested that the real solution there is like to embrace to a greater extent pluralism, right? Which is just to allow other people to be who they are. There's the
Yeah.
freedom of religion, freedom of speech. But it is interesting, like, why do people get so upset? The fact that there's even a person out there that believes differently from you can be so upsetting. And every once in a while, I get upset too. I'm like, I cannot believe that, for instance, I have relatives that they want a bloody socialist revolution, and if it's not bloody, they don't want it. When I first heard that, I was like, oh, this is like sickening to me because it's my nightmare. It's basically like whatever my nightmare that could happen. So the fact that they think this and, would just like, willingly choose the death of however many just for kind of their own personal preference, like kind of seems sickening to me, but also it's like, now I don't have that same reaction. Now I'm not repulsed by that thought. I'm just like, all right, that's their thought. So
Yeah.
I think it is possible to get some distance between, like me and you. Like I don't have to be overly influenced by you and vice versa. And just because we're both, kind of like psychopathic spectrum type people doesn't mean we necessarily reflect on each other either. I think that's like another thing that people really resonated with in the book. I know because it's the most liked quote from the book on Goodreads. Some people have like pointed it out to me where if people have read the book, I talk about like growing up as a girl, it's like they're like chalk lines, outlining your form. And you're
Yeah.
always like trying to like brush them away and be like, no, I just want to be me. I want to be, not this chalk lined version of myself. But everybody like keeps trying to kind of put the chalk lines back. And that for some reason it seems to be more even women who are doing it because they're like, no, you are a girl, you are part of
Yeah.
me. And for some reason, when you do things, I feel like it reflects on me. That's how some women feel about each other. I think also, Chrissy Teigen.
Yeah. Hmm.
Now I know like very little about her, but I do know that there was a controversy with her recently about is it man, what is her name? Courtney Stoddard? Is that her name?
Uh, I just saw this morning and I can't think of it now either.
So forgive me if I'm like saying any of this incorrectly, everybody, but the controversy is that Courtney was married when she was like 16 to this dude, Doug. And I kind of remember when it was happening, it was like in like tabloid news or something. And then I guess Chrissy Teigen had like a lot of tweets, being like, take a dirt nap, kill yourself. My fantasy is for her to die. And it's like, why? And I guess
Yeah.
my girlfriend Aria loves Courtney Love, but Courtney Love says stuff like that too, like she's a slut and stuff. It's like, why? Why would we say that about somebody else? What makes us so
It's so
angry?
unnecessary.
Yes. But it
It's
is
half.
I think it's
Oh,
connected though. Like the hate of psychopaths is connected to this, is connected to just not letting
yeah.
people be themselves. Like not trying to pressure you to go to the park. You know, there's something where it's like we do have to, I think, embrace a greater pluralism and just allow other
Yeah.
people to make choices different from ours without feeling like that somehow affects us when it doesn't.
It's half, I think, being, just the animals that we are, and uh being a herd type creature, being mammals, while also being humans and being, people with the only thing that we know that we're aware of who has the ability to think consciously. So there is a certain level of like, I no, okay, so first off, I am a person of color for the people who can't see my face. Um, to me, race isn't a thing. Just it's not. It's the level of melanin in your skin based on genetics and the amount of sun that you get. Beyond that, like to me, that could be the definition of race in the like literally in the dictionary. Your ethnicity is important because it's the culture of where you're from. But beyond that, I just don't think it should be a thing. That being said, I understand more than enough why it's a thing and why it makes sense. Not that people should be racist, it should not be in any way, shape, or form. But if you look at any other animal on the planet, like it really has nothing to do with race. It's just people who are different from you. You could have let's go with a group, two different groups of wolves that are like two completely different uh species of wolf. I don't know all of the scientific things about that stuff, but they're going to be so wildly different that yeah, they're going to fight for territory. But it goes even further than that. It could just be two of the same species of wolf that are just two different packs. Hell, they might even have like, blood relatives in each pack just based on how all that stuff works. And they're still going to hate each other because they're out, to protect their territory. And that goes for lions, that goes for sea creatures, birds. Birds are assholes. But I mean, hey, people are more like birds than we care to admit, don't we?
Yeah.
Bringing it back to people, it's like you said, it's you're more likely to take care of your nieces and nephews than you are some random stranger. But even then, you're probably also more likely to take care of your own kids over your nieces and nephews. Like it's a matter of that animalistic, tribalistic herd mentality, while again contrasting with being an individual who can think for themselves and do what they want. And you're trying to then decipher that between what you want and what everyone else is saying you should be wanting. So really, I guess it's not even two, it's three different things. It's just basic nature, society as a whole, and then you as an individual.
Really interesting point about you as an individual, but I'm a little bit curious. I mean, I do not want to misquote you about this. You kind of said race is not a thing, but it also you can understand why it is a thing. Kind of.
Yeah.
Do you want to like elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, okay, race and then racism. Race to me, it's a human construct, and any human construct isn't real because nothing else in the universe utilizes it. Race, technically ethnicity, money, religion, the list goes on and on like a Toblerone bar. But the way that we look at it, it's so unnecessary. It is. It's the same thing as just being racist in general, like or being mean, like all those tweets that you were talking about. Like it's not why why that's me as the individual saying that, like, you are fully aware that this is another human being who has thoughts, who has feelings, who has emotions, who has will, they have desires, they have dreams, they eat, they go to the bathroom, they put on their socks 1 foot at a time, just like everybody else, right? And you're still going to go out of your way because their skin is a little bit darker than yours? That doesn't make sense to me, because of the fact that it's literally just that their skin is a little bit darker than yours. And you have
decades, centuries, possibly millennia of this mindset in your social history telling you that you're supposed to be racist without telling you anything. It's just built in. It's something that you do have to reprogram yourself to see if you are racist. And this is also coming from, I'm a person of color. I don't say specifically what race because like I am Black and white. And I don't like, that's already a thing. Like I grew up with having to deal with all this shit. Like, okay, all of my mom's family is white. My dad's family is Black. My dad's family lived in North Carolina. I grew up in Illinois with my mom's family. So I'm seeing a ton of white people while going to a Black church because I'm also unfortunately a religion escapee. So seeing all these different race things, and even as a little kid, filling in the other bubble on all the standardized tests and constantly having to tell people, I'm not Black. Yes, you are. No, because if you're saying I'm Black, you're saying I'm not white, which I'm both. Like, I just realized at a very, very, very young age that race isn't a thing. It doesn't make sense for it to be a thing. Your ethnicity should matter because it, like I said, it's where you grew up. It's the culture you were around. So for me, it's, you know, a little bit American, a little bit Black, a little bit Croatian because my family's from Croatia and Slovenia. But like, if I had to say what my ethnicity was, honestly, I wouldn't know what to say anymore because I've never been to Croatia. I haven't done any really Croatian things. Anything that I know about Croatia, I've learned myself just from my own interest. But then I also don't want to say that I'm American because if I say that, like people just you don't really have an American ethnicity, if that makes sense. So it goes back to that labeling thing. This is where labels come in handy because, okay, so what are you? Where are you from? How do you identify? Well, at the same time, it sucks because that's what causes all of these different racial things and all of these different, the Israel and Palestine,
Right.
all of it just, it's a perpetual machine of, hey, if we all just kind of agree to be cool, this wouldn't be an issue. But then people say like, you're Black, so clearly you're stupid, and I'm not going to listen to you as a white man.
Dang it.
You know what I mean?
So I'm a little bit curious. You said race and then racism, but just on race still, race is not a thing. But what about these people who self-identify as a race? Like that's one of the labels that they think, yeah, this accurately describes them. Like why do you think people, if it's not a thing, it's not just that it seems like it's being imposed by other people, but they're also self-identifying, or do you think the self-identifying is kind of being imposed externally too by whatever social forces?
I have given up on trying to understand what's going on inside of other people. So I'm not going to say why they identify the way they do, whether they feel it's themselves or society.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, like, if that's how people identify, more power to you. Like, I'm not going to stop you. However, I am still going to say my point. Like that, and that's what it comes down to. It's like, y'all can do what you want. I don't really care. Ultimately, if what every human is saying is that racism is bad, and all these other things of like, yeah, we could be, you know, space travel and save the planet. Yeah, like, okay, why aren't we doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're saying that, but you're not actually doing anything about it, and then you're perpetuating things that also in turn perpetuate all of these other negative things. It's fine that you want to identify as Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Latinx, whatever, but in turn you are then promoting the fact that race is a thing, which means racists are then allowed to say, now I'm not saying they're allowed, but in their mind they're allowed to say, okay, well then my race is better than yours. When again, you're not really thinking my race is better than yours. What you're saying is you're different from me and therefore I dislike you because you need to focus on your own pack of wolves. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, again, it really, the racist thing comes from the individuals trying to rationalize what is this societal pressure for something that ultimately is completely arbitrary, because again, it's just humans who think about this stuff. Everyone else or everything else on the planet is just trying to live and survive. We're the ones who go out of our way to make it racist or sexist or homophobic or transphobic, or add a religious label or a national label. Like, we do that. Again, labels can be helpful and they can be useful, but only, it's not that labels are a good thing or a bad thing. They're a neutral thing, and we tend to utilize them in a negative way more often than not.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then you said so there's race, racism, and then there's kind of the role that the individual plays. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
It's I like the three brain theory, where you have a bird or lizard brain, then you have the mammalian brain, and then you have the human brain, which would be the prefrontal cortex. So, or the neurocortex, I don't know. But I kind of I kind of relate most things to that, like those levels of pure nature being the reptile brain, the society and being a part of the pack being the mammal brain, and then you as the individual and what you think and what you feel and what you're trying to do, uh, in spite of everything else and because of everything else. That's the human brain. So you don't have control over the reptile brain. You don't have control over what nature does really at all. You can kind of like, if you're going to get mad about something, you're going to get mad about it. You can control how mad you get, but you're going to be mad, and that's okay. And that's one of those things that, like, you as the human brain have to like rationalize and think like, okay, I'm mad, I'm going to be mad, I'm going to go paint instead of punching this person in the face. But then, like, it's something you have to just figure out how to deal with in the moment. The society thing is a matter of, you can change it, but you have to actively try to change it. And depending on what you do, you may actually make things change for the better, or you could make things so much worse. And it all depends on how you go about it, what your reasoning is, and what other, like, how you're interacting with the world around you. So it ends up being a matter of uh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No worries. So you're saying mammalian brain, well, you said lizard brain, we don't really control it, to a large extent. I think that's true. Like you can't control, you can't turn on adrenaline or turn it off or something. There are various things that we can't control about our body's functioning, because the body's like, we don't trust you to control it. Right?
Yeah,
I think essentially. And then the mammalian thing is kind of interesting, because it's like, this is probably why we can't trust you, is because you have these mammalian instincts to do some things that are sometimes irrational, and like largely inconsistent. I do think
yeah,
that we get that a lot from the mammalian. And I can see how, like, yes, you can control it, but it's not like it's the easiest thing in the world to do or whatever. Like, you really are
yeah.
swimming against a current, trying to kind of even see things as they really are there, because the mammalian brain is trying to color and contextualize the information that we're
Yes.
receiving in different ways.
That's the point that I lost was, if you're going to try and change things, you're going to be a part of the crowd unless you try to change the crowd. But if you're going to try and change the crowd, you have to be able to see the bigger picture. If you're stuck in the thing that you're doing, first off, you need to be in the thing. Think of it like a company. Like, nobody on the ground floor wants to see a higher up brought in from outside the company, because then it's just like, you're telling this person who's never been here that they have authority. What? So you try to like make things better, but you can only do so much on the ground floor. So you try to get your way up to me where that higher up is, so you can see you know how things are at the ground floor, and now you can see how to fix it from up higher up. And you have to be able to have that full picture in order to change the crowd for, and again, this is where it gets to be for the better or the worse, especially when you're talking about things like race. For the better, you could be Lincoln and free the slaves, or be MLK and just be a badass, or you could be that other guy with the mustache
Hmm.
and just kind of make things bad for everybody involved.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, I like to think I have kind of like this. You say for the better or for the worse, but I also kind of think the nice thing about Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr. is that they seemed to be uh, they seem to be like reluctant foes, I guess, in a way. Like they I see I see nowadays kind of a ends justify the means mentality. Like I can treat you poorly because you're a bad person, right? And we just have to label a bunch of people bad people and just treat them poorly, and that's the solution. I kind of get that vibe from
Yeah,
like
yeah.
modern kind of social movements right now, a lot of them at least, where I'm like, okay, and it's not on like one end of the political spectrum or like one, it's basically for every cause. It seems like there are people within that cause, not everybody within that cause, but people within that cause who are like, yep, that's how we make things better. And I'm
Yeah.
always like, oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
You were talking about the bloody socialist revolution, and I
Yes.
totally, like 5-10 years ago, would have. And again, this is just a difference in the two of us fundamentally. You're white, I'm not. Like when I say bloody socialist revolution, I mean, like, I'm talking about hyper specific people who are, there is no benefit. Certain people who may have led the country in the past 4 years, things of that nature. Beyond that, no, like, I don't want, no, people can learn, people can grow, but you have to want to teach them. You have to want to make things better overall. Like, and a lot of people, I'm appalled at how many people who are allegedly on my side of things are willing to do that, are willing to just immediately go to that bloody revolution place for everyone who's against them, regardless of what it is they stand for individually, without wanting to try and stop and educate and like and yeah, try to see things from their perspective. And there's only so much perspective you can get, you know
Well, I think the
given
interesting,
how things are. But
yeah, I do think there is a tension between the mammalian, tribal, whatever, and the individual. I do think the mammalian, even like, hey, our pack is the best pack. We have to take down the other pack or whatever. It's life or death. That you're really within the same species. You're pitting yourself against others. You're just like, however you define the pack or whatever is often, as you say, arbitrary, because again, it's human constructs. It's not anything the universe would like recognize outside of human existence or human thought. And so we're fighting to the death over these arbitrary concepts in which you have pitted yourself against somebody. And why fight to the death? And why is it, the real person who suffers here, I think, is the individual. Because in order to have that sort of I think, kind of just, like off the cuff thinking with you, in order to have that sort of force, in your social movement, like, okay, we are the good guys, they are the bad guys, let's go after them, you do require a lot of conformity. I think, you need to believe in the righteousness of your cause. So everybody in your group has to conform to these particular things. And then I do think there's like a lot of violations of people's kind of individuality and their personhood, and including their personal boundaries. Like that's one thing that I think has been a major casualty of the past like 5 to 10 years that I've seen, is people no longer respect other people's personal boundaries. I can say or do whatever I want to you is has become the new rule. And every once in a while on Twitter, I'll see things get particularly bad or something, kind of like go in there and tell people like, you can't tell other people what to do, you know They're their own person. They get to choose what they want to do. And people push back on me and be like, yeah, I can tell them what to do. It's their right to not do it or something. I'm like, really? In this mammalian sense, you really think that you have the right to just kind of force things on people? You have no authority over them. You're just telling other people how to live their life. You're trying to defend that. You're trying to say that's a right way to be, that respects other people's personhood. Like for more on like boundaries, check out my talk with Bree said, in which I kind of like go through. I'll briefly describe them again. My main three boundaries that I always tell people are: one, you can't tell other people what to do. They're their own people. They live their own lives. Unless you are, you have some sort of authority over them, like you're a parent. I guess like in certain circumstances, a police officer who has legitimate authority, whatever it is, you're not allowed to tell people what to do without their consent. I mean, people can consent to
Yeah.
be like, yeah, okay, you're my personal trainer, tell me what to do. Or you're my personal stylist,
Yeah.
tell me what to do. Or you're my teacher, tell me what to do. Right? Obviously there's that, but without somebody's consent, without somebody say so. That's the first one. Second one is you can't tell people about themselves without their consent. You can't tell people who they are.
Yes.
Everybody gets the
And
right to, I mean, everybody's an individual autonomous being. Everybody gets the right to define for themselves their own reality, their own existence, because you do. Think about it. Do you like people listening, do you want somebody to tell you like what your beliefs have to be? No, because everybody's an individual. They everybody gets this freedom. So you can't tell people what they are, who they are without their consent. That's like a huge violation. It's mostly just those two. I guess the third one is just kind of like little summary of the two. Yeah.
don't be
And but
shitty.
well, I mean, honestly, if you're following those first two, you won't be shitty. Like I can't if I say something that's like offensive, like classical music is better than whatever country music. If it's offensive to you, I mean, it's just my belief, right? Can I express my own belief? Yes, you can express your own belief. What if it offends other people? I mean, that's a great question. What if it offends other people? Should you not be yourself to stop offending other people? That's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time. I mean, you can see how bad it is. Should little black girls not be themselves so as not to offend other people? To just conform to these arbitrary expectations that we just kind of inherited from like our forefathers of whoever who just, were making crap up along the way. How can we defend that? So there really is like a lot, this more mammalian kind of tendency, as you define it, that really does seek to oppress the individual, whether it's on the left or the right, or, like the north or the south, or wherever it is. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, recognizing yourself that when you engage in these kinds of like, oh, it's us against them, what you're really saying is it's us against the individual.
I mean, that's kind of the way at least you and I have been brought up being here in America. Like that's capitalism is literally designed to pit people against each other. Like and I know that for a fact, and tying it back into the pack thing is like one of the things that I say in every interview, because I do think it is something that like you would want to say to a potential employer. But thinking about it in this context, it's really weird. Like I will tell people like if you hire me, I'm gonna want us to be the best. Like I'm gonna do everything I can for our store to be better than every other store in this district. Like
Hmm.
that is my goal. And I say that in every interview, and it's thinking about it now, it's just like, oh God, yeah, it is very much a pack mentality. And I'll even go one further and say, like, but even then, like, I want our store to be better than all the other stores, but I'm also here to look after like myself and my coworkers. Like, because I know the company's not going to take care of us, depending on what company it is, obviously. But in most cases, yeah, no, it's like still, 8.50 an hour, if that. And there's like this there it's just again, it all bleeds together and it doesn't have to, but we have to try. We have to go and really uh there's this trading card game, Magic the Gathering.
Hmm.
There's a yeah, there's a card from a set, New Phyrexia. This is I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now. I don't remember the exact quote, but every now and again, a card will have flavor text on it, and there's like a quote or something. But the card is Jin Cataxis, and that's Jin, I think, dash something. You just look it up and it's easy, fine. But I don't know the whole quote, but part of it, the part that matters is like perfection is not a goal, but a process. And that's something that has stuck with me ever since I first found that card, which was again probably about 10 years ago now. And it's something that I've just been, you know, going the opposite direction. People like want to find those movie moments, want to like wait for the big crescendo, for the thing to happen, for the next chapter to start, for the next phase of their life to get going. And those things never happen. You have to make them happen. Otherwise, you're going to see it happen, not realizing what it is. And then you're going to look back at it and be like, oh shit, I totally missed that opportunity just because I wasn't there for it. And I've been seeing it more and more in society, this thing of there is no goal. You can't just stop racism. You can't just, stop capitalism. You can't just, no, it's not going to happen that way. You have to grow. You have to learn. You have to educate. You have to try and be a little bit better than you were the day before. And it's something that, yeah, I have been seeing more and more and more of in society. And I'm hoping that, at least in my lifetime, that is something that we'll have, and maybe then we will be able to get to this place of following those rules. I brought that up because I was going to say, if you didn't have a third, like that should be the third. Like, just remember that perfection is not a goal, it's a process, and that there's always going to be an extra step that we have to take in order to realize that we are individuals, but we are also in a place where we have to work together to get anywhere. Otherwise, we're all going to drown.
Yeah.
The ice caps are going to melt.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you say about perfectionism. I had my therapist, RIP, he recently passed away, used to
I'm
say,
sorry.
no problem, used to say that people learn things in a different order than you do. So just because you learned this when you were little, and now you meet somebody in adulthood who has not learned that yet, doesn't mean that they're like a dummy or they're basically juvenile or whatever, that they just haven't had the experiences yet to learn that. And I think it is interesting, and it's a very kind of unforgiving stance, especially to just assume, as I think we often do on social media, that everybody's at the same level we are, and that if they haven't learned something, it's because they're XYZ bad, fill in the
Yeah.
blank, bad things. So I do think, yeah, it's not necessarily a personal boundary, I think, but I think it's like a really good way of trying to keep in mind that, as you said earlier, despite the way that we look, gender, label, ethnicity, etc., we all really are just humans. And I think most people are trying to do their best. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was like keen to talk to people like you, is so people can hear even psychopaths trying to do their best. Even though,
It's
yes,
like,
are we flawed? Yes. Should we be doing bad things? No. I never justify the behaviors. And I wouldn't justify any bad behavior. Especially mistreating people, or not respecting people's personhood, are particularly important to me. But yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, it's like, yeah, no, all we can do is try. And a quick sidebar, specifically for the listeners, specifically the younger listeners, about social media. Social media is not real. It
Hmm.
is, but it's not. It's half a completely curated. It's real life curated, so you get to see the specific best parts. So when you brought up, comparing yourself to other people on social media, that's a very fresh thing for me, of trying to keep that in my mind of don't do that. And so yeah, just if you're listening, don't don't. It's not a fun time.
Yes, I agree. Uh, I think there's a lot that seems real that isn't really real, and it's been really interesting talking to you about it and kind of getting your unique perspective on it, because your I feel like our personal experiences lead us to like particular truths, But this is one that I think I needed a reminder on about certain things. Like what you said about like is such a smart idea. I think that if it's just a human construct, it's kind of not really real. Except to the extent that we kind of pretend it is, like the emperor's new clothes. Like, yeah, it is real because we can see its effects, money or whatever. But at the end, it's kind of not really real. And so to just understand, it's fine to still pay for things with money and understand it's not real. But I think if you don't understand these underlying kind of fragility, then I think that we end up sort of deceiving ourselves about like who we are and what the world looks like and how other people are. And even though it's nice to be able to simplify things for efficiency and just be like, like for instance, I always test this INTJ, or I'm a Cancer, right? I think it's like, well, uh, as you said earlier, even that is a quick and kind of sloppy way of just categorizing things, right? It
Yeah.
oversimplifies things because whenever you simplify things, you always oversimplify things. In fact, there's a phrase about it: the map is not the territory. And it basically
Yes, I
means like,
love that phrase.
yes, you can look at the map and the map can have a lot of detail and you can think it's pretty accurate, but it doesn't represent everything. It never represents everything. The only way the map
Yeah.
could be the territory is if it was the territory. So just kind of understanding the limitations of these things. I do have to
Yeah.
take off. Are there any closing thoughts, things that you wanted to bring up that we never got around to?
Um, uh, Probably. Nothing I can think of specifically. I had a thought, but it was more of a going off of something you had said earlier. So
Oh, no, you can bring it up if you still remember it.
I don't. That's the
No, don't worry,
problem.
don't worry. Well, yeah, it'll be interesting. Maybe we can catch up with you again in a few months and kind of see how things are going. See, yeah, I don't know, see if your thoughts are still the same, if they change or whatever. So let's definitely keep in touch.
Oh, actually, I do remember the thing.
Good.
Um, eh, Tying back into how we can be individuals but still be one people, but then also like the differences between like left and right and all those things. um I've been watching recently the Disney Plus show Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Just ended a couple weeks ago, I think now, and I just finished it all. And the premise of the show is that the antagonist is trying to bring things back to the way they were during the blip in between Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, where half the population gets wiped out and Earth essentially is just one planet and one people. And it's interesting that over the course of the 6 episodes of the season, you see this person, what their goal is, and that they have a noble goal. And like at the end of the day, it is, one planet, one people. That's what they want. And you see how more bloody and willing to ends justifying the means they get. And so I remember I had wanted to say something kind of tying that into what you had said about all that, and just the way that the world could be, but then like I said, having to take that extra time to think, okay, but what's the cost for it, and how is it going to be received by everyone else? And then yeah, it just again ties into those rules that you had mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. How does it violate people's individuality? That's a good kind of like getting back to it, like this idea of the three brains you talked about. Yes, survival's good, but sometimes we know that our reptilian brain does us wrong. It
Yeah.
like makes us fat because we crave fat and sugar. It like spikes our adrenaline when we just we're about to give a speech or something. It does us wrong, like in these situations where it's like, dang it. And I think it's like a natural extension to just understand your mammalian brain is also doing you wrong. You know, like some
Yeah.
of your impulses are not good impulses. They're not, I'm sure some of them are, but like just statistically, some of them are not. And I think the best way to kind of look at it In the same way that we kind of look at our reptilian brain, and if we kind of like look at it through the lens of mammalian brain, we're better able to, you know,
Yeah.
contextualize some of those reptilian impulses. I think if we look at the mammalian brain through the lens of like our individuality, then and understanding that everybody's a separate person at the end of the day, you know, and each has their own autonomy, then that helps again contextualize some of the things that our mammalian brain is telling us to do. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so
Very
much,
that.
Luca. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure
Thank
talking
you.
with you.
If I can, I have one final thought that just to wrap everything up.
Love this.
Playing off of what you said, surviving is good, living is better, but striving for something better is probably best.
And what is the better? The best version of yourself? As true to yourself as you can be?
I would say half that and half just actually no, all three, or at least the two bigger ones. And better as an individual and better as a group, just because again, we are just kind of on this giant moldy rock hurtling through space together. Let's try and make the best of it and not be douchebags to each other. Just it just seems like things would be a lot easier that way in my mind, you know?
I agree. All right. It was good talking with you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.